Hi, I'm Bob Henderson. I'm the Nomad Dad. Got a couple of things to talk to you about today. First of all, the Economic Freedom Index. And then as a part of my presidential birthplace tour in the summer of 2023, I came across a piece of the torn down Berlin Wall. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So let's talk about the Economic Freedom Index first. I think it came out, the first one came out about 30 years ago in 1994. It's put out by the Heritage Foundation. And what they do is they take a look at the, 160, 70, 80 different countries around the world, and they rate each country for how much freedom they have economically. So it's from free to mostly free to moderately free all the way down to repressed. And for the early years throughout the 90s and the early 00s, the United States was always in the top five, always in the top five. I don't want to bury the lead, but in 2023, the U.S. not in the top five, number 25. That decline you sense is real. And you know what, even worse than that? We're just this close from going from the mostly free to the moderately free tier. This in the supposed land of the free and home of the brave. Who would have thunk it? It's appalling. Why has it happened? Well, first of all, nobody is allowed to fail, so the government just bails everybody out. They spend way too much money. This creates inflation. This creates huge budget deficits, $33 trillion of debt, projected to go to $2 trillion a year in the not too distant future. It's insane. But you know, there are a lot of people that like to tell other people how to live their lives, and those are the people mostly who are in government, and that's what you're getting right now. I mean, they buried the private sector in many, many ways. And this is why your economic freedom goes down, down, down. It's happened in Great Britain rather precipitously. Canada and Australia are right around the top 15 now. They were often in the top 10, so they're not immune. But the United States, all the way down to number 25. Then I started thinking about the Berlin Wall. I was on my presidential birthplace tour. I did some videos on that previously. I went to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley. And when I was leaving, you walk out the door and there is a piece of the torn down Berlin Wall. Little backstory on the Berlin Wall. It goes back to the end of World War II. The Germans are defeated and the winners are sitting at the table with them, dictating the terms of surrender. So it's the English, it's the Americans, it's the Russians, and a few other lesser allies, but essentially those three. And what they ended up doing was dividing Germany up into two countries, West Germany, East Germany. They've since been unified, but that's what they were after World War II. And then they took the city of Berlin and divided that into two sectors, West and East. West, of course, the American-British sector, more free. And the East was under the control of the Russians. And it wasn't too long after that. I remember Winston Churchill came to the United States, gave a speech in 1948 about this Iron Curtain that was descending upon the Eastern European countries because the Russians, the Soviets, had become oppressive in these Eastern countries, including East Berlin, East Germany, and the economies were closed, repressive, they became communist. And so some people wanted to escape for freedom, particularly in East Berlin. They wanted to go to the West. I mean, maybe their family or friends were there. And after a while, the authorities decided, well, we can't have this. So they built the Berlin Wall. That was in 1961. They built it at the Brandenburg Gate, which is a very historical structure in Berlin going back, I believe, several hundred years before Napoleonic times. So they put in barbed wire and checkpoint Charlie and all. This was to keep people in. And by 1987, roughly a quarter century later, President Reagan had seen enough and he went to the Brandenburg Gate ostensibly to speak to the new Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev. And in a very famous speech, Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And 2 years later, the wall was torn down, not by Gorbachev, but by the people. Piece by piece, they dismantled the Berlin Wall. It's on national television. It's on worldwide television in December of 1989. And all these Eastern Bloc, Iron Curtain countries, they didn't have walls, but they tore down the metaphorical walls, the symbolic walls. They tore them down and threw off the shackles of communism. And they did it without firing a single bullet. It was a marvelous time in history. I never thought I'd live to see the day. People wanted freedom. and the wall was torn down. And I'll come back to that wall in just a moment. I had a stepfather who was an officer in the Czech army in World War II. And Czechoslovakia was a rather prosperous country, hardworking people. I can tell you, there's no way they thought during World War II in the 1940s that they were going to be on the wrong side of the Berlin Wall. But that's exactly what happened. I mean, it was a matter of months, maybe a year or two, and boom, they're on the wrong side of the wall. Some of them maybe were smart enough to skate to where the puck is going to be, the puck of freedom, using the hockey metaphor. But most didn't, and they were on this side, and they were there for 45 years. So let's get back to not only the Berlin Wall, but the Economic Freedom Index, which I brought up at the outset here. You know, when you have the deficits and the debt that we have, the politicians will take the easy way out. And so they'll say, well, you know, let's raise taxes. So the Biden budget was released in 2023, and they knew it had no chance of passage. After all, the opposition party has control of one house of Congress. But in this budget, they wanted to raise the tax on income from 37 to 44%. That's bad enough, but worse, there would be no distinction between ordinary income and long-term capital gains. So long-term gains taxed at 44%. Currently, the highest rate is just under 24%. And the average of the OECD rates is only 30. We'd be 50% higher than that. Who's going to invest? Now, we have a big election in 2024. If the president's party sweeps the White House and both houses of Congress, and I think there's a reasonably good chance they do, I can see the president in 2025, kind of like Reagan in 1987. Reagan, remember, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. I can see the president in 2025 going to Congress and saying, pass my budget, tear down this economy. Because that's exactly what they would be doing, tearing down the economy with draconian tax rates like this. So they're coming for the money of people who've got money. And what's the biggest single pool of capital in the country? Has been for decades. Retirement plans. That's the first place I think they come after taxation. And I can see them saying something like, well, if you like your retirement plan, you can keep your retirement plan. Wink, wink. Oh, but wait, you'll need to buy Treasury securities. After all, it's the patriotic thing to do. We've got these deficits to cover. So you're going to be, with the inflation that we've got, losing purchasing power every day. But worse, you've lost freedom. You can't invest your own money the way you think best. So what can you do? Perhaps you can set up an offshore IRA. It's perfectly legal. Nomad Capitalist can help you with that. You can set up a foreign bank account. Now, if you earn income from it, which you should, you need to report the taxes. If you're a U.S. citizen, of course, you pay taxes on your worldwide income. And there's an FBAR form you have to file. If you've got $10,000 on any single day in a given year, you have to report an information return called FBAR. Do it. Be above board always. You can buy foreign real estate. Under current law, it's not reportable. Now, if you have income, rental income, you report that to the relevant tax authorities. And you can buy gold and store it offshore. Two of the best places to store gold offshore are Switzerland and Singapore. And isn't it interesting that every year since 1994, those two countries have always been in the top 5, usually the top 3 of the Economic Freedom Index. Freedom has its advantages. These are some steps you can take. If you're not going to leave your country of residence in these perilous times, because, as I pointed out, the U.S. in particular, that decline you sense is real. We've gone from the top 5 Economic Freedom Index to number 25. It's appalling. I'm Bob Henderson. I'm the Nomad Dad.